Okay, everyone, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really interesting little comparison for you guys from Christopher Ward and Traska. Now, these are both dive watches, some key characteristics in design when you're looking for divers. Of course, you're going to find water resistance, tip loose, don't dive, screw down crown. You want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a dive extension is always nice if on bracelet. And both of these are on bracelet. On the left-hand side, you have the Christopher Ward C60 Trident Pro 300 in the 40mm size. On the right-hand side, you have the Traska Freediver 7th generation in that Chaouen blue. Now, these watches in price point are not that comparable. I mean, one is a decent amount below $1,000 with the Traska, and the other one is right around $1,000 when it comes to the Christopher Ward. But they do have some similar feature sets in terms of them being, really kind of class leading in terms of what they offer spec wise for the money. Now, they definitely do have two different approaches. Of course, with Christopher Ward being founded in 2004, they're a British run, Swiss made independent brand that grew up from a niche micro brand. Whereas Traska, founded by John Mack in 2018, is headquartered in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, with Asian production. Now, of course, you would be saving a good amount of money if you go for the Traska, but stylistically, the Ward is definitely the more contemporary option, and I'd say even slightly more bold and more complex in terms of some of its case finishings. But does more complex mean better necessarily? And how does a clean classic style stack up against something a little bit more fresh and contemporary? With that, I'm looking at two great watches. There's not going to be a loser here out of these two watches. If you own either of these watches, you're way ahead of the game. So with that said, let's zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys. Now, of course, besides the fact that these are two independent brands, really one of the main points of focus here. Speaking of focus, come on, camera. All right. One of the main points of focus here is really going to be the fact that these are lovely blues in terms of them being quite glossy with, of course, ceramic inserts and glossy dials. These are quite stunning. Some other similarities, of course, is that the fact that you do get date window at 6 o'clock, and that's quite nice. Also, some other items: 3-link style bracelets and quick adjust clasps. Although I will say they have updated the Christopher Ward clasp. I'll say I'm a fan of this iteration. I still have to check out the newer one, but from what I saw, it, at least from me, didn't feel like a step in the right direction. So if anything, I'm going to favor this clasp a bit more. So don't think that I shortchanged the Ward by any means. Now, in terms of the sizing, you have a 40mm versus about a 40.5, which is interesting because when you look at these two, I would say in your mind, you're going to think that the Christopher Ward is bigger, but it just has a much bigger dial. So this is, again, where you see that dial to bezel ratio really come into play. In terms of the thickness, guys, although 11.3mm is quite thin for the Ward, this Traska is actually a good bit thinner at just 10.5mm, but that is not including the crystal. With the crystal, it's 12mm, which is actually a bit thicker, but also it's using less tricks. So when you look at the case profile itself, you can see the undercuts, the bevels, it all comes together to really make that appear visually quite thin. Versus here, you're going to get something that's quite thin, but it's just not pulling out all the stops in terms of some of the complexity and the tricks visually. Of course, it's going to be fully polished, beautifully sculpted there. Ooh. And it looks great. And you can see, of course, I think silhouette-wise, quite thin. And, in reality, it's still quite thin. Just, again, less complex. So the Christopher Ward case is definitely working harder for your money, but where I think Traska really excels in terms of where they work harder, in this comparison at least, is look at the bracelets, both 3-link bracelets, but here something you'll notice is that it's just basically 3 links pinned together. Very traditional kind of oyster link style, whereas here with the Traska, you're going to get these individually articulated links. So essentially, they're not fixed into a Y shape. They can actually really fully articulate, which isn't a huge deal while you're wearing the watch, to be completely honest. It's really while you're taking the watch on and off in terms of the way that it's going to drape. It's just going to be very comfortable. Also, in allowing you to wear the watch possibly a little bit looser or a little bit tighter with more comfort incorporated. Now, both of these, again, very, very handsome and quite popular. I think as we speak, sold out, and this one has been in and out of back orders since released. So these, again, are 2 great watches. Do not feel bad if you end up liking the watch, one watch versus the other, or you're reading the comments. Wear the stuff that you enjoy. But if you're somebody that could use a little bit of input, a little bit of direction, I would say these are 2 great options that I would point you towards. Now, I've done full reviews of each of these watches, so if you want full-on details, definitely check the channel history for that, or I'll try to leave links at the end of the video. Now, in terms of the lug-to-lug here, guys, 47.4 versus 48, interestingly enough there. So again, it's not just about ultimate dimensions. There's a lot that has to do with proportionality, that dial to bezel ratio, and in this case, it's wild how different they play when you look at them just because of this larger, more expansive dial. Now, in terms of bezel action, there is a winner here, and it's the Christopher Ward. It's just extremely composed. There might be a little bit of play, but I wouldn't even want to call it that, because honestly, it feels way too solid. Oh, wildly good. 120 click. Here. Ooh. Quite a bit more audible. But not quite as refined feeling in terms of the action. The smoothness. Again, it's more of a refinement issue, not a quality issue. But, I mean, of course, this one is paying homage to Big Crown dive watches, so just a different type of era, of course, modernized and really transformed into its own design language here, which I really appreciate. Both of them have screw pin construction, although you'll notice here, although I'd say the quality of the bracelet isn't quite as good as the Traska, the screw pins tell me otherwise. Look at how flush fit those are, and you see them on both sides, both flush. Now, you're going to get a one-sided screw pin construction here. Of course, you're going to have some polished sides on the links, so I'm just going to wipe those off very quickly. Very, very nice. You're also going to get 2 half links to really dial this in. 6 positions of toolless micro adjustment from this very cool push button clasp. Boom. Very nice. And then from here, you're going to get about 4 positions. And non-ratcheting, you basically have to pull that lever again and kind of adjust from there. Although very solid, I do like the triggers here. Beautifully beveled, very, very handsome either way, and nicely contoured in terms of the underside of that scissor section. Here, the contouring isn't quite as nice, but the finishing is. You're going to get a little bit of decorative perlage there, which I think looks great and is a very nice touch. So with that said, let's actually get these on wrist and compare how they wear. Very classic, very nice, striking shade of blue. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, it's going to make the watch seem a lot larger than it actually is. But you can also see, even at these angles here, guys, with the perspective distortion, one thing that's not getting distorted is going to be the level of clarity and the finishing here. Very, very nice. On the other side, a little bit more simple, but still executed to a very high level. Also, one thing I forgot to mention that some of you might be screaming at the screen is this watch has a hardened coating on it. So very scratch resistant versus completely exposed. So that is something that's awesome. But some of you will say that's not technically objective because it's subjective if you want your watch to have a scratch resistant coating on it because you can't ever fix it. You can just strip it completely off if you had to refinish. So that is a drawback. But I will say, if you look at the brightness in this hard coating, it's evolved over the years so well. Look how clear and bright that is versus here, standard steel. It's actually brighter and it's coated. It should be the other way around in terms of one looking a bit more dull, but it's not the case here. Look at how full of life this bad boy is. Very nice. And you're also going to get, of course, that box Dome Sapphire. Versus here, you're going to get the straight, flat sapphire, but still quite good. I'm digging them both. Which one do you think looks better on my wrist? Let me know down in the comments. So with that said, let's actually get these off the wrist and set up for... Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's tighten up the frame so you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio. Check that out. Look at the way that lays. That is fantastic. I love the balance here. On the other side, of course, a lot more fun, a lot more sporty, but maybe also a lot more, maybe, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Maybe a lot more compromised. And its chase to be different. It's left some great details from previous C60s out. Of course, it's all in kind of in service of making these watches stand out as more original designs. Whereas here, I think Traska's done a wonderful job really balancing that idea of a watch that has a look that is quite accessible and familiar without it being a direct homage. So very, very cool, very handsome. Oof, I dig it. So with that said, let's go ahead and get these pieces off the wrist, set up for some loom shots, the light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Oh, hard to argue either way. Both of these are using grade A BGW9 loom, and it shows. They both glow really fantastically. Of course, on one side, you're going to have the individual markers there all the way around that 60-minute increment, versus on the other side, it's going to be every 5 minutes. But I think both are quite legible. Now, one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a little light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes rather like in less than optimal lighting. And you can see even here, as I get a little bit more direct on either of these watches, those blues hold up beautifully. Which is your preference there? Ooh, I'm digging this. Look at that. So much to enjoy. I love a good blue dial diver. Now, the channel is kind of built on blue dial divers, to be quite honest, if you look in the channel history. Now, again, I love both of these watches. They're both been in the long-term collection, different iterations of them over the years, but these currently are two of the latest and greatest that the brands have to offer. And of course, I think they nailed it. Both brands, and I think these are both great. I will say that Traska has been stealing a lot of wrist time, even from my precious and beloved Seiko Prospex Marine Master 200. SJE119. I love that watch, but this Traska has snuck its way onto my wrist more and more. But let me know, out of these two, what are you thinking? Is there another model you think kind of surpasses both of these in terms of value proposition? Because I think these two are outstanding options for those of you that are on the market. So with that said, let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like, and if you're not already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.